On one of the coldest January nights in Manhattan, a macabre discovery in a luxury penthouse. A killer who planned every detail, every movement, every breath, but forgot that society's most invisible eyes are often the ones that observe the most. This is the story of how a 3-second mistake destroyed years of perfect planning and exposed the true face of evil. The siren cuts through Manhattan's frozen silence like a sharp blade slicing silk. It's 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in January, and snowflakes dance under the orange streetlight glow on Park Avenue, creating an almost romantic atmosphere that brutally contrasts with the horror about to be discovered. The Meridian Tower building rises like a glass and steel monolith against the dark sky, its sparsely lit windows revealing fragments of New York elite's nightlife. On the 47th floor, Evangeline, Sterling's penthouse remains in absolute silence, a silence that will soon be broken by her housekeeper's desperate scream. Margaret Walsh, 58 years old, had worked for the Sterling family for over 2 decades. Her hands tremble violently as she holds the phone, trying to form coherent words between sobs. She's, please come quickly. There's something very wrong here. The first officer to arrive is Officer Danny Rodriguez, a 15-year veteran who's seen everything on New York streets. But when he enters the penthouse, even his experience doesn't prepare him for what he finds. The scene is disturbingly organized, as if death were just another decorative element in the luxurious environment. Evangeline Sterling, 42 years old, socialite known for her philanthropic contributions and extravagant parties, sits elegantly in her burgundy velvet armchair, facing the panoramic window, offering a breathtaking view of Central Park. Her blue eyes are open, fixed on the horizon, as if contemplating the urban landscape one last time. There are no signs of struggle, no blood, no disorder. Everything is meticulously in place. What disturbs Rodriguez isn't just the victim's apparent tranquility, but the almost artistic precision of the scene. Evangeline's hands are carefully positioned on the chair's arms, her blonde hair is perfectly arranged, and even her makeup remains intact. It's as if she had simply stopped existing. Rodriguez immediately secures the area and calls for backup. While waiting, he notices details that make his skin crawl. On the Italian marble coffee table sits a teacup still warm, with a lemon slice floating delicately on the golden surface. Beside it, an open book on page 247, Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. The irony doesn't go unnoticed. The entire apartment breathes controlled opulence. Impressionist master paintings adorn the walls, Persian rugs cover Brazilian hardwood floors, and fresh flower arrangements, white roses and lilies, perfume the environment with a fragrance that now seems morbid. Every object is positioned with mathematical precision, as if the environment itself were an extension of the meticulous mind that orchestrated this death. At 4:23 a.m., a black-crowned Victoria stops in front of Meridian Tower. Detective Harper Voss emerges from the vehicle, her dark brown hair pulled back in a practical bun, her grey wool coat contrasting with pale skin that reveals poorly slept nights and too much coffee. At 38, Harper carries in her features the intensity of someone who dedicated her life to deciphering humanity's darkest minds. As she rides the private elevator to the penthouse, Harper feels a disturbing familiarity. This isn't the first time she's encountered a crime scene that's too perfect. 7 years ago, a similar case nearly destroyed her career and sanity. The clock killer, as the media dubbed him, positioned his victims so their bodies marked specific times when viewed from above. Harper caught him, but not before he claimed 9 lives and left permanent scars on her psyche. The elevator stops with a soft ping, and Harper enters the penthouse. The first impact is sensory. The smell of roses mixed with something she can't immediately identify, but that makes her stomach turn. It's not exactly the smell of death, but something more subtle, almost chemical. Detective Voss? Rodriguez approaches, clearly relieved to transfer responsibility. The victim is Evangeline Sterling, 42, daughter of steel magnate Harrison Sterling. The housekeeper found her around 3:30. We haven't touched anything. Harper walks slowly toward the armchair where Evangeline rests. Each step is calculated, her eyes scanning every inch of the environment. She notices there are no signs of break-in. The locks are intact. The security system wasn't breached. Whoever did this had access, Harper thinks, or was invited in. Approaching the victim, Harper observes the serene expression on Evangeline's face. There are no traces of fear, pain, or surprise. It's almost as if she had peacefully fallen asleep. But Harper knows appearances deceive, especially when dealing with sophisticated criminal minds. She examines the victim's hands without touching them. The nails are perfect, with no signs of struggle or defense. The navy blue silk dress is impeccable, without wrinkles or stains. Everything. Too perfect, too organized, too planned. Has anyone called forensics? Harper asks, not taking her eyes off the scene. They're on their way. Should arrive in 10 minutes. Harper continues her preliminary analysis. The body's position, the book choice, even the teacup's temperature, everything seems to communicate a specific message. But what? While awaiting the forensic team, she mentally photographs every detail, knowing that a single overlooked clue could be the difference between justice and impunity. The cold January wind hits against the panoramic windows, creating an almost musical sound that echoes through the silent apartment. Harper feels a chill that has nothing to do with temperature. There's something in this scene that screams criminal sophistication, a mind that doesn't just kill, but makes death a form of perverse art. The positioning is too deliberate. The victim faces the window as if watching the city one last time. The book opened to exactly page 247. Harper makes a mental note to research the significance of that page in Dostoevsky's masterpiece. The warm tea suggests the killer stayed after the murder, perhaps admiring his work, perhaps ensuring every detail was perfect. Harper notices something else, a faint sweet scent beneath the roses. Not perfume, not cleaning products, but something clinical, medical perhaps. The thought sends a chill down her spine as she recalls reading about killers who used medical knowledge to achieve their goals without leaving traditional evidence. The silence in the apartment is deafening. Even the city's usual nighttime hum seems muted here, as if the building itself respects the gravity of what has occurred. Harper can hear her own heartbeat as she circles the scene, each observation adding to a growing sense that this isn't a random killing, but part of something much larger and more sinister. As she waits for the forensic team, Harper studies the victim's face once more. Evangeline Sterling appears almost peaceful, but there's something in her expression, a subtle tension around the eyes that suggests her final moments weren't as serene as they appear. Whatever happened here required the victim's cooperation or complete surprise, and Harper suspects it was the latter. And in the depths of her experienced investigator's consciousness, Harper already suspects that Evangeline Sterling won't be the last masterpiece from this death artist. The forensic team arrives like a well-orchestrated symphony of crime scene investigation. Oliver Kane, the lead forensic analyst, steps into the penthouse with the methodical precision that has made him one of New York's most respected experts in his field. At 45, his graying temples and wire-rimmed glasses give him an almost professorial appearance, but his eyes hold the sharp focus of someone who has spent decades reading the silent stories that death leaves behind. What do we have, Harper? Oliver's voice carries the familiar comfort of a partnership forged through countless crime scenes over the past 8 years. He sets down his equipment case with practiced efficiency, already scanning the environment with the analytical gaze that has helped solve some of the city's most complex cases. Harper steps back, allowing the forensic team to work while she briefs Oliver on her initial observations. Evangeline Sterling, 42, found by her housekeeper. At 3:30 a.m., no signs of forced entry, no apparent struggle, positioned like she's watching the sunrise she'll never see. The whole scene feels curated. As Oliver begins his preliminary examination, Harper's mind drifts to the case file that changed her life 7 years ago. Detective Lieutenant James Morrison had been her partner then, before his promotion to captain. Together, they had pursued the clock killer through 3 boroughs and 14 crime scenes, before finally cornering him in an abandoned warehouse in Queens. But not before Harper had made a critical error in judgment that cost an innocent life. The memory surfaces unbidden, the moment she chose to pursue one lead while Morrison investigated another. The moment she arrived 20 minutes too late to save Patricia Hendricks, a young teacher who had the misfortune of resembling the killer's preferred victim type. The image of Patricia's body, positioned to indicate 11:47 p.m. on an imaginary clock face, still haunts Harper's dreams. That case had taught her that brilliant killers don't just murder, they communicate. Every positioning, every detail, every seemingly random element carries meaning. The clock killer had been sending a message about time running out, about society's neglect of punctuality, about the precision he brought to an imprecise world. What message is this killer trying to send? Harper's phone buzzes, pulling her from her dark reverie. Captain Rex. Dalton's gravelly voice fills the line, carrying the weight of 30 years in law enforcement and the particular exhaustion that comes from managing both crime scenes and departmental politics. Voss, I need you downtown in 20. We've got a situation. Captain, I'm in the middle of processing a potential homicide. Evangeline Sterling, Upper East Side. This scene has all the markings of something bigger. A pause. Harper can almost hear Dalton weighing his options, balancing the immediate political pressure that comes with high-profile victims against his trust in her investigative instincts. Finally, Sterling, as in Sterling Industries. Christ, Harper, this is going to be a media circus. I'm pulling Morrison off the Bronx case to assist you. This takes priority over everything else. The line goes dead and Harper feels a familiar mixture of excitement and dread. Captain Morrison's involvement means the department is taking this seriously, but it also means the pressure will be immense. Morrison, now 52, carries himself with the quiet authority of someone who has seen the worst humanity has to offer and still believes in justice. His promotion to captain 3 years ago had left Harper without a partner, something she initially resented, but eventually came to appreciate as it allowed her to work cases with the methodical solitude her psychology demanded. Oliver's voice breaks through her thoughts. Harper, you need to see this. His tone carries an urgency that makes her pulse quicken. She approaches the coffee table, where he's examining the teacup with a magnifying glass. The tea is still warm, but not just warm. It's the perfect drinking temperature. Someone maintained this temperature deliberately. And look at this. Oliver points to the cup's rim with a gloved finger. No lipstick residue, despite the victim wearing burgundy lipstick. She never drank from this cup. Harper leans closer, studying the implications. So our killer prepared tea for a guest who never arrived, or the tea was part of the staging. But here's what's really interesting. Oliver moves to examine Evangeline's hands more closely. Look at her fingertips. Under his magnifying glass, Harper can see tiny puncture marks on each fingertip, so small they're barely visible to the naked eye. What am I looking at? Blood sugar testing marks. Multiple ones. Either our victim was diabetic and testing her blood sugar obsessively, or someone was drawing blood samples repeatedly. But here's the kicker. There's no glucose meter anywhere in this apartment, and her medical records show no history of diabetes. The implications hit Harper like a physical blow. Someone had been drawing blood from Evangeline, possibly over an extended period. The meticulous positioning, the medical precision, the complete lack of struggle. This wasn't a simple murder. This was the work of someone with medical knowledge and extended access to the victim. As Oliver continues his examination, Harper studies the apartment more carefully. Everything speaks of wealth and refinement, but also of a life lived in isolation. The refrigerator contains meals for one, the medicine cabinet holds only basic items, and the personal photographs show Evangeline at charity events and social gatherings, always smiling, always surrounded by people, but somehow always seeming alone. Detective Voss? A voice from the hallway announces the arrival of Captain Morrison. Even after 3 years in administration, he moves through crime scenes with the instinctive awareness of a seasoned investigator. His salt and pepper hair is perfectly groomed despite the early hour, and his charcoal suit shows no wrinkles, details that speak to the discipline that made him one of the department's most effective leaders. James, Harper greets him with the familiarity of their long partnership. This isn't random. Someone with medical training had extended access to our victim. The precision of the scene, the blood work evidence, the complete lack of defensive wounds. We're looking at someone who gained the victim's trust completely. Morrison surveys the scene with the analytical eye that made him Harper's most effective partner. Any obvious connections to previous cases? Not yet. But my instincts are screaming that this is part of a pattern. The staging is too elaborate for a first kill. Someone has been practicing perfecting their technique. As if summoned by her words, Oliver calls out from across the room. Harper, Morrison, you need to see this. I found something behind the bookshelf. They follow him to the far wall, where he's moved several leather-bound volumes to reveal a small hidden camera, no bigger than a button, nearly invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. Our killer wanted to watch, Oliver explains, his voice carrying the weight of a disturbing realization. This isn't just about the murder, it's about the performance. Someone has been observing Evangeline for weeks, maybe months. Harper feels her blood turn cold as the full scope of what they're dealing with becomes clear. This isn't just a killer. It's a predator who studies his victims extensively before striking. The medical knowledge, the surveillance, the meticulous staging. They're hunting someone who approaches murder with the same methodical precision that a scientist approaches an experiment. And somewhere in the depths of her experienced intuition, Harper knows that Evangeline Sterling is just the beginning of a much larger and more terrifying pattern. The NYPD's major case squad bullpen buzzes with the controlled chaos of serious investigation. Detective Harper Voss stands before a wall-mounted whiteboard, its surface covered with crime scene photographs, timeline markers, and red string connecting seemingly disparate pieces of evidence. 3 days have passed since Evangeline Sterling's body was discovered, and what initially appeared to be an isolated incident has revealed itself as something far more sinister. Captain Morrison enters the bullpen carrying a stack of case files, his expression grim. "Harper, we've got a problem. 3 more cases from the past 6 months, all with striking similarities to the Sterling murder. The brass kept them compartmentalized between different precincts, but when the pattern analysis software flagged the connections, everything changed." Harper turns from the whiteboard, feeling her pulse quicken. "Show me." Morrison spreads the files across Harper's desk, like a dealer revealing a losing hand. Victoria Lawson, 38, found dead in her Tribeca loft 4 months ago. Rebecca Chen, 41, discovered in her Upper West Side apartment 6 weeks later. And Thomas Whitfield, 45, found in his Soho penthouse just 3 weeks before Sterling. As Harper examines the crime scene photos, the similarities are undeniable and chilling. Each victim sits peacefully in their favorite chair, positioned to face windows with stunning city views. Each scene shows the same meticulous organization, the same absence of struggle, the same theatrical precision that marked Evangeline's death. "What did the initial investigations conclude?" Harper asks, though she suspects she already knows the answer. "Natural causes in 2 cases. Probable suicide in the third. No follow-up investigations were deemed necessary." Morrison's voice carries the frustration of a career investigator who recognizes bureaucratic oversight when he sees it. Different precincts, different detectives, different conclusions. No one connected the dots until now. Oliver Kane arrives with a box of evidence from the previous crime scenes, his usually composed demeanor showing cracks of genuine concern. "I've spent the last 48 hours re-examining evidence from all 3 scenes. Harper, what we're looking at is unprecedented in terms of sophistication." He spreads enlarged photographs across the conference table. "Look at this. Same tiny puncture marks on fingertips in all 4 victims. Same positioning of the body to face windows. Same evidence of prolonged observation. We found hidden cameras in every location." Harper studies the images with growing horror. The killer has been perfecting his technique. Look at the progression from Lawson to Sterling. Each scene becomes more elaborate, more theatrical. "But here's what's really disturbing," Oliver continues, producing a forensic report. "Toxicology on the Sterling case came back. Trace amounts of succinylcholine in her system." Morrison frowns. "Explain that for those of us without medical degrees." "It's a paralytic agent used in surgery," Harper explains, her medical knowledge from previous cases suddenly relevant. "It causes complete muscle paralysis while leaving the victim conscious and aware. It metabolizes quickly, making it nearly impossible to detect unless you know exactly what to look for." The implications hang heavy in the air. Their killer doesn't just murder, he ensures his victims are fully aware of what's happening to them, while being completely unable to resist or call for help. The cruelty is methodical, calculated, and deeply personal. Oliver produces another set of documents. "I did some digging into the victims' backgrounds. All 4 were patients of the same psychiatrist, Dr. Aldrich Blackwood. His practice specializes in treating high-functioning individuals with anxiety and depression." Harper feels puzzle pieces clicking into place with disturbing clarity. A psychiatrist would have access to detailed psychological profiles, would understand how to gain complete trust, and would have the medical knowledge to use succinylcholine effectively. "There's more," Oliver continues. "I analyzed the hidden camera footage from all 4 locations. The killer observed each victim for weeks before striking, learning their routines, their habits, their most vulnerable moments. This isn't opportunistic killing, it's predatory hunting with extensive preparation." Morrison reaches for his phone. "I'm calling Judge Harrison for search warrants. We need access to Blackwood's patient records, his office, his home, everything. While Morrison handles the legal logistics, Harper studies the crime. Scene photographs more closely. There's something in the positioning of each victim that suggests a deeper meaning beyond mere theatrical display. Each body faces east toward the sunrise. Each victim's hands are positioned identically. Each scene includes a specific book open to a particular page. Oliver, what books were found at each scene? He consults his notes. Lawson had The Stranger by Camus, open to page 67. Chen had Notes from Underground by Dostoevsky, page 134. Whitfield had The Trial by Kafka, page 201. And Sterling had Crime and Punishment, page 247. Harper grabs a marker and writes the page numbers on the whiteboard. 67, 134, 201, 247. There's a progression here, but I can't see the pattern yet. As she stares at the numbers, her phone rings. The caller ID shows an unknown number, but something compels her to answer. Detective Voss. The voice that responds sends ice through her veins. Detective, I've been watching your investigation with great interest. Your attention to detail is quite remarkable. The voice is cultured, educated, with the slight accent that suggests expensive private education. You're beginning to understand the artistry involved in my work. Harper signals frantically to Morrison while keeping her voice steady. Who is this? Someone who appreciates beauty in all its forms, including the beauty of a perfectly executed plan. Your victims. And yes, I know you've connected them. Now, each represented a particular philosophical problem that required resolution. What kind of resolution? A soft laugh echoes through the phone. The kind that comes when suffering ends, detective. When the weight of existence becomes too much to bear. Sometimes the kindest act is to provide release. Harper realizes with horrifying clarity that she's speaking to their killer, and he's justifying his murders as acts of mercy. Where are you calling from? Oh, detective, that would spoil the game entirely. But I will tell you this, my work isn't finished. There are still souls who need my particular form of salvation. The line goes dead, leaving Harper staring at her phone with a mixture of terror and determination. Their killer isn't just methodical and medically sophisticated, he's also arrogant enough to make contact directly. That arrogance might be the mistake that brings him down. Morrison approaches with warrants in hand. Judge Harrison fast-tracked everything. We have full access to Blackwood's practice as of now. Harper pockets her phone, deciding to keep the killer's call to herself for now. Then let's go meet the good doctor. Something tells me Dr. Aldrich Blackwood has a lot of explaining to do. As they prepare to leave, Harper takes one final look at the crime scene photographs spread across her desk. 4 lives ended with surgical precision, each death staged like a macabre art installation. But killers, this sophisticated, always have weaknesses, and Harper intends to find his before he can add a 5th masterpiece to his collection. The hunt for New York's most calculating predator is about to enter its most dangerous phase. The Blackwood Psychiatric Institute occupies a converted Gilded Age mansion on East 72nd Street, its limestone facade and wrought iron details speaking to old money and established respectability. As Harper and Morrison approach the building through the late afternoon shadows, the setting sun casts long fingers of light across the sidewalk, creating an almost theatrical backdrop for what promises to be a crucial confrontation. The interior maintains the mansion's original grandeur while incorporating modern medical efficiency. Crystal chandeliers hang above Persian rugs, and oil paintings of stern-faced philanthropists observe visitors from gilt frames. The receptionist, a young woman with nervous eyes and perfectly manicured hands, looks up as they enter. Detectives Voss and Morrison, NYPD, Harper announces, producing her badge. We have a warrant to speak with Dr. Blackwood regarding an ongoing investigation. The receptionist's face pales slightly. Dr. Blackwood is with a patient, but I can see if... Ma'am, this is a homicide investigation. Morrison's voice carries the authority of 3 decades in law enforcement. We need to see him immediately. Within moments, a tall figure emerges from the elevator with the fluid grace of someone accustomed to command. Dr. Aldrich Blackwood appears to be in his early 50s, with silver-streaked dark hair perfectly styled and piercing blue eyes that seem to take in everything while revealing nothing. His charcoal suit is impeccably tailored, and his handshake is firm but not aggressive, the calculated touch of someone who understands the power of first impressions. Detectives, I'm Dr. Blackwood. "How may I assist you?" His voice carries the cultured tones Harper recognizes from the phone call, but she keeps her expression neutral, waiting to see how this plays out. "We're investigating the deaths of several of your patients," Harper begins, studying his face for any reaction. "Evangeline Sterling, Victoria Lawson, Rebecca Chen, and Thomas Whitfield." If Blackwood feels any surprise or concern, his expression doesn't betray it. Instead, he nods thoughtfully, as if considering an interesting academic problem. "Tragic losses, all of them. Please, let's discuss this in my office where we can speak privately." His office occupies what was once the mansion's library, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with psychiatric texts, philosophy volumes, and classic literature. A mahogany desk dominates the center of the room, and two leather chairs face each other near a window overlooking a small garden. Everything about the space speaks to intellectual sophistication and professional success. "I must confess, detectives, I'm puzzled by your visit," Blackwood says, settling behind his desk with practiced ease. "All 4 individuals you mentioned died of natural causes or suicide. I'm not sure what connection you're drawing to their psychiatric treatment." Morrison leans forward. "Dr. Blackwood, we have evidence that all 4 victims were murdered using succinylcholine, a paralytic agent that requires medical knowledge to administer effectively." For just a moment, something flickers behind Blackwood's eyes, not surprise, but perhaps admiration. "Succinylcholine, how fascinating. That would require considerable medical sophistication to use effectively. The killer would need to understand dosage, administration methods, and timing to avoid detection." Harper notes how quickly he transitions from shock to clinical analysis. "You seem quite knowledgeable about its applications." "My undergraduate degree was in biochemistry before I pursued psychiatry," Blackwood explains smoothly. "I maintain an interest in pharmacology as it relates to psychiatric treatment, but surely you don't suspect me of harming my own patients." "We're exploring all possibilities," Harper replies. "Can you account for your whereabouts on the nights each of these individuals died?" Blackwood reaches for a leather-bound appointment book, his movements deliberate and unhurried. "Certainly. I maintain detailed records of my schedule." He flips through pages with practiced efficiency. "The evening Victoria Lawson died, I was attending a symposium on cognitive behavioral therapy at Columbia. Rebecca Chen's death occurred on a night when I was having dinner with colleagues at the Union Club, easily verified. Thomas Whitfield died on a Tuesday when I was conducting a group therapy session that lasted until nearly midnight. And dear Evangeline, I was at the opera that evening, La Traviata at the Met. I have the ticket stubs and can provide witnesses for all occasions. The alibis are too perfect, too readily available, and Harper's instincts scream that they're dealing with someone who has planned every contingency. But she presses forward. "What can you tell us about each victim's mental state before their deaths?" Blackwood's expression becomes more somber, taking on the gravitas appropriate for discussing deceased patients. "I'm bound by doctor-patient confidentiality, of course, but given the circumstances, all 4 were struggling with profound existential depression. Not the clinical depression we typically treat with medication, but a deeper philosophical despair about the meaning of existence itself." He stands and moves to his bookshelf, selecting a volume with deliberate care. Victoria had recently lost her husband to cancer and was questioning whether life had any purpose without love. Rebecca was brilliant, but felt trapped by societal expectations of success. Thomas was facing financial ruin and couldn't see a way forward that preserved his dignity. And Evangeline, so poor Evangeline felt that despite all her wealth and privilege, she had never truly lived. Harper notices that his descriptions match the books found at each crime scene, philosophical works dealing with existential despair and the meaninglessness of existence. The connection is too precise to be coincidental. "Did you ever discuss ending their suffering with any of these patients?" Morrison asks bluntly. Blackwood turns back to face them, his expression showing carefully calibrated surprise. "Detective, are you suggesting I encouraged suicide? That would be a violation of everything I stand for as a physician." "We're asking about your therapeutic approach," Harper clarifies. "Some practitioners believe that validating a patient's desire to end suffering can be therapeutic. I believe in helping patients find meaning in their struggle, not in ending it," Blackwood replies with what seems like genuine conviction. Each of these individuals had tremendous potential to overcome their despair with proper treatment and support. As the interview continues, Harper becomes increasingly convinced that they're speaking to their killer, but also increasingly frustrated by his preparation and sophistication. Every answer is plausible, every alibi verifiable, every response carefully calculated to deflect suspicion while demonstrating cooperation. Dr. Blackwood, Harper says, deciding to take a different approach. Have you ever been contacted by anyone claiming to have harmed your patients? For the first time, Blackwood pauses, and Harper sees something genuine flicker across his features. That's an interesting question, Detective. No, I haven't been contacted by anyone making such claims. Should I be concerned for my safety or that of my current patients? The concern seems authentic, but Harper notices that he didn't deny knowledge of someone who might target his patients. It's a subtle distinction, but one that speaks to the careful parsing of truth that sophisticated liars employ. We're investigating all possibilities, Morrison says. We may need to speak with you again as our investigation develops. Of course, Blackwood replies, standing to escort them out. I'm always available to assist law enforcement in any way that serves justice. As they leave the building, Harper feels the weight of frustration and mounting pressure. They've just spent an hour with someone she's convinced is their killer, but he's covered every angle, prepared for every question, and presented himself as nothing more than a concerned physician cooperating with a police investigation. What's your read? Morrison asks as they reach their car. He's our guy, Harper says without hesitation. Too perfect, too prepared, too knowledgeable about the medical aspects, but proving it is going to be nearly impossible with the evidence we have. As they drive away, Harper catches a glimpse of Blackwood in her side mirror, standing at his office window, watching their departure with what might be amusement or satisfaction. The game between predator and investigator has officially begun, and Harper realizes they're hunting someone who has spent years preparing for exactly this moment. The question now is whether they can find his weakness before he claims another victim. 3 days after their encounter with Dr. Blackwood, Harper finds herself standing in the service corridor of the Meridian Tower at 11 p.m., retracing the killer's possible movements. The building's night shift creates a different world, one populated by invisible workers who keep the machinery of luxury functioning while the wealthy sleep. It's here, among those society overlooks, that Harper hopes to find the crack in their killer's perfect facade. The building superintendent, Miguel Santos, leads Harper and Morrison through the maze of service corridors that run behind the glamorous facade of Manhattan's most exclusive residences. Most people, they never see this part, Miguel explains in accented English, his weathered hands gesturing toward the narrow hallways lined with utility pipes and electrical panels. We are like ghosts. We come, we work, we go. Nobody notices. But Harper has learned that those who are invisible often see everything. Miguel, on the night Ms. Sterling died, who was working the building? Miguel consults a worn clipboard. Night shift, we have 3 people. Catalina for cleaning, Jorge for security, and me for any emergency repairs. Quiet night, mostly. We'd like to speak with each of them, Morrison says, starting with Catalina. Miguel nods toward a storage room where the sound of a vacuum cleaner hums steadily. She's been cleaning the upper floors. Very good worker, Catalina. 12 years here. Never any problems. They find Catalina. Mendez methodically cleaning a marble-floored lobby on the 42nd floor. She's a small woman in her late 40s, with graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and hands that show the effects of years spent handling industrial cleaning chemicals. When she sees the police badges, her expression immediately becomes guarded, and Harper recognizes the particular wariness of someone whose immigration status makes any police contact potentially dangerous. Catalina, we're investigating what happened to Ms. Sterling, Harper says gently, switching to Spanish. We're not here about immigration. We just need to know if you saw anything unusual that night. The relief in Catalina's eyes is immediate, but the wariness remains. I cleaned many floors that night, she says carefully. I see nothing strange. Harper senses there's more, but pushes too hard, too fast will shut down any chance of cooperation. Can you tell us about your normal routine? What floors? Do you clean? What time you start and finish each one? Catalina sets down her vacuum and wipes her hands on her uniform. I start at 10 p.m. on the 30th floor. Work my way up. Each floor takes maybe 45 minutes if no big mess. The 47th floor, Ms. Sterling's floor, I usually clean around 2 a.m. And that night? Morrison asks. That night, Catalina hesitates, glancing around as if walls might have ears. I finish the 46th floor early, maybe 1:30. I decide to start the 47th floor. Get ahead of schedule. Harper's pulse quickens. What did you see on the 47th floor? Catalina looks down at her hands, clearly struggling with whether to speak. Finally, she looks up at Harper, with eyes that have seen too much hardship to be naive about consequences. I see a man leaving the service elevator, not supposed to be there. Can you describe him? Tall, maybe 6 feet, well-dressed in dark suit, but what I remember most, she pauses, touching her throat nervously. He wore doctor's white coat over the suit, and he carried medical bag, the kind doctors use for house calls. Harper and Morrison exchange a look loaded with significance. What time was this? Maybe 1:45, 1:50. He didn't see me. I was behind the service door, just cracking it open to check if hallway was clear before I start cleaning. Did you see his face clearly? Catalina nods slowly. He walked right past my door, had gray hair, very neat, clean shaven, looked like doctor on TV. Shows, you know, handsome but serious. The description matches Dr. Blackwood perfectly, but Harper knows that eyewitness testimony, especially from someone fearful of police contact, can be unreliable. Catalina, would you be able to identify this man if you saw him again? The fear returns to her eyes. I don't want trouble, I have family, I need this job. Harper reaches out and gently touches Catalina's arm. I promise you, helping us catch this man will not cause you any immigration problems. This man killed Ms. Sterling and 3 other people. If we don't stop him, he'll kill again. Something in Harper's tone seems to reach Catalina. After a long moment, she nods. If it helps catch the man who hurt Ms. Sterling, then yes. She was always kind to me, always said thank you when other people pretend I don't exist. Morrison steps forward. We may need you to look at some photographs, maybe testify in court. Will you help us? Catalina straightens her shoulders with a dignity that transcends her humble circumstances. Ms. Sterling deserves justice. I will help. As they prepare to leave, Harper has one more question. Catalina, in all your years working here, have you ever seen this man before that night? No, never. And I would remember not many doctors make house calls at 2 a.m. The drive back to the precinct is filled with electric energy. They finally have a witness who can place someone matching Blackwood's description at the scene of the crime at the right time. But Harper knows that defense attorneys will attack Catalina's credibility, her immigration status, and the lighting conditions in the service corridor. It's not enough to arrest him, Morrison says, voicing Harper's thoughts. We need more evidence to support her testimony. The medical bag, Harper realizes suddenly. If Blackwood made house calls to all 4 victims, there might be other witnesses, other building staff who saw him but didn't think it was significant at the time. Back at the precinct, Harper begins making calls to the buildings where the other 3 victims lived. If their killer has been making house calls to his victims before murdering them, establishing medical relationships to gain trust and access, then someone else must have seen him. The first building superintendent she reaches, managing the Tribeca loft where Victoria Lawson died, listens to her description with growing interest. No, detective, now that you mention it, we did have a doctor visiting Ms. Lawson regularly in the weeks before her death. Said he was treating her for anxiety, making house calls because she was agoraphobic. Harper's heart races. Did anyone see this doctor clearly? Let me check with my night security guard. Jose, he's got an eye for details. 20 minutes later, Harper has confirmation that a man matching Blackwood's description had been making regular visits to Victoria Lawson under the guise of psychiatric house calls. Similar calls to the other buildings yield the same pattern, a well-dressed doctor with a medical bag making evening visits to patients who were supposedly too anxious or depressed to visit his office. The picture emerging is of a predator who spent weeks or months gaining his victims' complete trust, studying their routines, and preparing for the perfect moment to strike. The house calls weren't just about access, they were about psychological manipulation, making his victims dependent on him before ultimately betraying that trust in the most horrific way possible. As Harper updates the case file with this new information, her phone rings. The caller ID shows the same unknown number from before. Detective Voss, she signals to Morrison to start the trace. I must compliment you on your thoroughness, the familiar cultured voice says. Finding Catalina was quite impressive. She's a remarkable woman, so observant despite being so overlooked by society. Harper's blood runs cold. He knows about Catalina, which means he's been watching their investigation closely. How do you know about... Detective, you underestimate how closely I follow your work. But don't worry about Ms. Mendez. She's not part of my artistic vision. She's merely collateral damage in our professional relationship. The threat is unmistakable. Harper grips the phone tighter. If you hurt her. Hurt her? Detective, you misunderstand my nature entirely. I'm a healer, not a destroyer. But I am curious to see how far you'll go to protect someone who can't protect herself. The line goes dead, leaving Harper staring at her phone with a mixture of rage and terror. Their killer isn't just arrogant. He's escalating, becoming more personal in his taunts. And now Catalina, the one witness who can tie him to the crime scene, has become a target. The hunt for Dr. Aldrich Blackwood has just become a race against time. The emergency protective detail arrives at Catalina Mendez's Queens apartment building within 30 minutes of Blackwood's threatening phone call. Harper and Morrison coordinate with ESU to establish a perimeter while maintaining surveillance on Blackwood's clinic and residence. The game of cat and mouse has escalated into a deadly serious chess match where one wrong move could cost an innocent life. Catalina's apartment is a modest two-bedroom in a working-class neighborhood, its walls decorated with family photographs and religious icons that speak to a life built on faith and hard work. When Harper explains the situation, Catalina's initial fear gives way to a steely determination that surprises even the veteran detective. This man, he thinks, because I clean floors, I am weak, Catalina says, her English becoming more precise as her anger builds. But I have survived things he cannot imagine. I will not let him scare me from doing what is right. While the protective detail secures the building, Harper's phone buzzes with a text from Oliver Kane. Emergency. Meet me at the lab. Found something that changes everything. The NYPD forensics lab buzzes with late-night activity as Oliver leads Harper and Morrison to his workstation, where computer screens display molecular diagrams and chemical analysis reports. His usually calm demeanor shows cracks of excitement mixed with horror. Remember the hidden. Cameras we found at each crime scene, Oliver begins, pulling up surveillance footage on his monitor. I've been analyzing the timestamp data, and I found something extraordinary. Look at this. The screen shows grainy footage from Evangeline Sterling's apartment, time-stamped 3 hours before her estimated time of death. A figure in medical attire moves through the apartment with practiced efficiency, but what catches Harper's attention is his behavior. He's not just visiting a patient, he's preparing a stage. Watch this, Oliver says, enhancing the image quality. He positions the chair precisely, adjusts the lighting, even practices the body positioning using a mannequin he brought with him. The footage reveals the killer's meticulous preparation, but more importantly, it shows his face clearly during several moments when he turns toward the camera. The enhanced images leave no doubt. It's Dr. Aldrich Blackwood. But here's the real breakthrough. Oliver continues, switching to another screen. I ran the camera's serial numbers and traced their purchase history. All 4 cameras were bought with the same credit card, registered to a shell company that traces back to... He pauses dramatically. Dr. Aldrich Blackwood's personal bank account. Morrison leans forward. That's our smoking gun. No alibi can explain away purchasing surveillance equipment to spy on his own victims. There's more, Oliver says, producing evidence. Bag containing a small vial. I found this hidden in a ventilation shaft at Blackwood's clinic during our search warrant execution. It's succinylcholine, enough to kill a dozen people. As the evidence mounts, Harper feels the familiar rush of a case finally coming together, but her satisfaction is interrupted by her ringing phone. Captain Dalton's number appears on the screen. Harper, we've got a situation. Blackwood isn't at his clinic or his residence. His doorman says he left around 8 p.m. with a medical bag, said he had an emergency house call. The blood drains from Harper's face. Catalina. The protective detail checked in 15 minutes ago. Everything was secure, but Blackwood is smart enough to wait, to watch, to find an opening when we least expect it. Harper ends the call and immediately dials the protective detail. The phone rings once, twice, 3 times before going to voicemail. A chill runs down her spine as she tries the backup officer, with the same result. We need to get to Queens now, Harper says, already moving toward the door. The drive to Catalina's apartment takes 23 minutes through late-night traffic, but it feels like hours. Harper's mind races through possibilities, each scenario worse than the last. A killer sophisticated enough to evade detection for months would certainly be capable of neutralizing a protective detail. They arrive to find the building's front entrance unlocked, the security, door propped open with a small piece of tape, a detail so subtle it could be overlooked but significant enough to allow silent entry. The protective detail officers are found unconscious in the stairwell, drugged but alive, their weapons missing. Harper and Morrison draw their sidearms and ascend the stairs with tactical precision, each floor bringing them closer to a confrontation that has been building since the first murder. The hallway outside Catalina's apartment is eerily quiet, but light spills from under her door. Morrison positions himself on one side of the door, while Harper approaches from the other. The sound of voices, calm, measured conversation, drifts through the thin walls. Harper strains to listen and recognizes Blackwood's cultured tones mixed with Catalina's accented English. "The paralytic agent I've administered will prevent any sudden movements," Blackwood's voice explains with clinical detachment. "But you'll remain fully conscious throughout the process. I want you to understand that this isn't personal. You're simply a loose thread that needs to be tied off." Harper signals to Morrison, and they breach the door simultaneously. The scene inside is surreal. Catalina sits in her favorite armchair, positioned to face the window just like Blackwood's other victims, her eyes wide with terror but her body completely immobile. Blackwood stands beside her with a syringe in his hand, looking more like a doctor making a house call than a serial killer about to claim his fifth victim. "Dr. Aldrich Blackwood, NYPD, Harper shouts, her weapon trained on his center mass. "Step away from Ms. Mendez and drop the syringe." Blackwood turns slowly, his expression showing no surprise at their arrival. "Detective Voss, Captain Morrison. Right on time, as I expected. Your predictability has been quite helpful in planning this evening's events." "It's over, Blackwood," Morrison says, advancing carefully while maintaining his firing position. "We have evidence linking you to all 4 murders. The cameras, the drug purchases, the surveillance footage, everything." A smile plays at the corners of Blackwood's mouth. "Evidence? You have circumstantial connections at best. Any competent attorney will create reasonable doubt around every piece of your case." Harper notices that despite his confident words, Blackwood's hand holding the syringe trembles slightly. The perfect facade is finally cracking under pressure. "Maybe, but you made one crucial mistake. You underestimated the people you considered invisible." "Catalina saw you leaving Sterling's building at 1:50 a.m., Morrison adds. "Your alibi puts you at the opera until midnight. That's a 2-hour window you can't account for." For the first time, uncertainty flickers in Blackwood's eyes. The testimony of an undocumented immigrant against a respected physician? No jury will believe her. They will when it's corroborated by security footage from 4 different buildings showing you making unauthorized visits to your victims, Harper says, taking a step closer. "And when they see the surveillance equipment you purchased to spy on them before you killed them." Blackwood's composure finally shatters. The syringe falls from his hand as the weight of his exposure crashes down on him. "You don't understand," he says, his voice breaking. "I was helping them. They were suffering, trapped in meaningless existences, and I freed them from their pain." "You murdered them," Harper states simply. 4 innocent people who trusted you." As Morrison moves to secure Blackwood, the captured killer makes one final revelation that sends chills through both detectives. 5 actually. "My first was 3 years ago, a practice run to perfect my technique. Detective Patricia Hendricks. I believe you remember her, Detective Voss." Harper's world tilts on its axis. Patricia, the victim. She couldn't save during the clock killer case. Hadn't been killed by that serial killer at all. Blackwood had been practicing his technique, using the chaos of an active serial killer investigation to hide his own crimes. "She fought the paralytic longer than the others," Blackwood continues with clinical detachment. "It taught me to adjust the dosage for future subjects." The revelation hits Harper like a physical blow, but it also brings a strange sense of closure. For 7 years, she'd blamed herself for Patricia's death, carrying guilt for arriving too late. Now she understands that Patricia was never meant to survive that night. She was Blackwood's test subject, his proof of concept for the perfect murder. As Morrison places handcuffs on Blackwood, Harper kneels beside Catalina, whose eyes show she's fully aware despite her paralysis. "It's over," Harper whispers. "You're safe now. The paralytic will wear off in a few hours, and then you can go home to your family." But even as they lead Blackwood away, Harper knows this case will haunt her dreams. They've caught a monster who viewed murder as art and victims as subjects for his twisted experiments. And somewhere in the depths of his confession, Harper realizes that Blackwood's final revelation about Patricia Hendricks might not be the whole truth. Some secrets, she suspects, died with the patients who could never tell their stories.